Hello, welcome to this total recap of Norman MacCaig. This is Aunt Julia, and I'm Miss AB. Let's get going. So, the poem. We'll read through it together first. Aunt Julia spoke Gaelic, very loud and very fast. I could not answer her. I could not understand her. She wore men's boots, when she wore any. I can see her strong foot, stained with peat, paddling with the treadle of the spinning wheel, while her right hand drew yarn marvellously out of the air. Hers was the only house where I've lain at night, in the absolute darkness of a box bed, listening to crickets being friendly. She was buckets and water flouncing into them. She was winds pouring wetly round house ends. She was brown eggs, black skirts, and a keeper of threepenny bits in a teapot. Aunt Julia spoke Gaelic, very loud and very fast. By the time I had learned a little, she lay, silenced in the absolute black of a sandy grave at Luscantire. But I hear her still welcoming me with a seagull's voice across 100 yards of peat scrapes and lazy beds, and getting angry, with so many questions unanswered. Okay, so we're going to go through the poem now and tunnel out all the key bits. So, first thing we have got, Aunt Julia spoke Gaelic very loud and very fast. We have got repetition, right? It is overwhelming. I could not answer her. I could not understand her. Here the dash is being used to set up an explanation. And this is the first point we see the frustration at the language barrier. Right? The key part to this is he could not. It's not that he wouldn't or he didn't want to, but that repetition emphasizes his frustration. Right? It's emphasizing that he wishes he could speak to her, but he can't. Stanza 2. She wore men's boots. Word choice. They're not men's boots, they're her boots. But by definition, she's a practical woman. When she wore any. This is partially poverty, highlighting that she doesn't wear shoes often, but also freedom from sort of typical convention at the time. I can see her strong foot. She's shown to be powerful. Stained with peat. Again, word choice. She's got this connection to the land. Paddling with the treadle of the spinning wheel. Old-fashioned. While her right hand drew yarn marvellously out of the air. So this is a metaphor and word choice, marvellously, right? She isn't drawing it out of the air, really. It's just what it appears to young MacCaig. So it makes her seem sort of magical, ethereal, capable of, like, great feats, right? So already we're seeing the awe that he feels towards her. Hers was the only house. Word choice. It's unique. It's special. Where I've lain at night in the absolute darkness. So again, it's nature. It's sort of exciting. Of a box bed. Word choice, rustic. Listening to. You've got enjambment here as well. increasing that suspense, making it more exciting. Crickets being friendly. Here we've got personification. Nostalgia. Imagination. Positivity. Right? He is imagining that these crickets are like loving him being there, so he's having the best time on this like holiday. Stanza 4. Apparently I thought this entire stanza was important, but it is. So it's this huge amount of imagery that we are just slapped with in this stanza. She was buckets and water flouncing into them. Obviously she was not really a bucket, and therefore it is a metaphor. So again, it's this rustic image. Water is obviously like the source of life, so it's very important. Flouncing is the first part of the sort of femininity that we get. For Aunt Julia, she wears men's boots. She's not particularly feminine, but the word flouncing, that idea, we get a little bit of femininity and a little bit of power. She was winds pouring wetly round house ends. Again, this is metaphor. Now we've got the power of air, right? We had water, now we've got air. So again, she's this powerful elemental figure. She was brown eggs. Metaphor, in case we were confused. Nourishing, right? Nourishment. But again, that rustic. Black skirts. Practical. Still part of the metaphor. And keeper of threepenny bits in a teapot. Now, this is not a metaphor because she is a keeper of threepenny bits in a teapot. But this demonstrates to us that she is not part of the civilized world, right? So she is apart from civilized world. Maybe distrustful. And it also demonstrates poverty. She's not keeping huge amounts of money back because she doesn't have it. Okay. Stanza 5. The final stanza. Aunt Julia spoke Gaelic very loud and very fast. So not only do we have the repetition of very, but this is repetition from earlier in the poem. The difference between the one earlier and this one is that when you first read this poem and you first see the first time he says this, it sounds scary. If you had a relative coming to you and just talking at you in a language you didn't understand, that would be quite overwhelming and quite frightening. And now we are told this, having all the information that we have about Aunt Julia and how incredible she is, we kind of get this sense of nostalgia and warmth and sort of happiness within the memory. So repetition, but it's more with a nostalgic edge. By the time I had learned a little, she lay silenced. So it's that idea of too little, too late. Sorry, there's a very loud motorcycle going past my window. So it's too little, too late. She lay silenced. And the word silenced here is key. Her voice is her power, right? He keeps drawing us back to the idea of her speaking very loud and very fast, so her being silenced is the loss of Aunt Julia. Absolute black is a return to earlier again, but now saddened. Of a sandy grave, and again we have another element, the earth here. But I hear her still, metaphorically, not literally, but it shows her power again. Welcoming me with a seagull's voice, this shows her connection to nature, which is key to MacCaig. Across 100 yards of peat scrapes and lazy beds, getting angry, repetition. That frustration is back with so many questions unanswered. So we've got this very sad tone to the end of the poem. it doesn't end with them getting to have that final reunion where they get to get everything out. He's too late. So we get this sad tone at the end, the sort of unresolved ending to their relationship. Okay, so that is the poem. So the plot of this poem is that the speaker is reminiscing about his time visiting his Aunt Julia in the Scottish Highlands. They did not speak the same language and so could not communicate effectively, but MacCaig grew to have a deep appreciation and love for his aunt. He still shows a huge amount of affection for her through the things that she does and the things that he represents her with. He shows his respect and reverence for her throughout the poem. She is unconventional. She is different from what he is used to in his sort of decadent towny lifestyle, if you will. So he is very excited to see her. At the end of the poem, we learn that she has died and that the speaker is still left with a bitterness and regret at his failure to communicate with his aunt. He doesn't manage to speak to her by the end. They don't manage to clear things up. They don't get to a point where they can communicate, and this is like a sore point for the speaker. Okay. The characters in this one are simple. We've got Aunt Julia and the speaker, who is MacCaig. I tried to find the youngest picture I could of Norman MacCaig for this, and it's a painting. So these are the two characters. It's important to note, however, if you are answering a question about isolation or loneliness, please do not say that Aunt Julia is lonely because she lives on an island with nobody there. It's not the case that she's keeping threepenny bits in a teapot because there's no one, like there's no bank or there's no one she can go to. There were other people on the island who spoke the same language as her. It's just MacCaig that can't. So it's his losing out because of the language barrier. It's not that she can't speak to anyone. I just want to impress that upon people because that's the mistake people make every year. The central themes to this are nostalgia, family connection, language barriers, civilization versus nature. These ideas that looking back on things and having that very warm feeling, families being important and a sort of inherent like connection between families, language barriers causing huge issues, and civilization versus nature, the natural state of family and civilization, those two languages and that difference that's built up because MacCaig comes from sort of an urban environment, causing this rift that he can't overcome. Techniques. The main technique to be aware of in this poem is repetition. There is a huge amount of word choice, and as we saw, there is an entire stanza dedicated to imagery. So it is hugely important that you take note of these three techniques. Finally, for the key quotations. I could not understand her. I could not answer her. I could not understand her. Repetition and frustration. Crickets being friendly shows us the personification and that nostalgia, that warm, happy feeling that he has while he's there. She was buckets. Metaphor, she's down to earth, she's rustic, she's unconventional but very, very practical. And then finally, getting angry with so many questions unanswered. We get that repetition, the frustration and tone of regret and sadness that the poem is left on. If you can't remember any other quotations than these are the ones to remember. So that is Aunt Julia as a recap for you. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.